Otis Redding drove another man to the most important recording session of his life. He was not the artist that day, he was the driver. But when the session fell apart and the studio was about to go silent, someone gave him a chance, and Otis Redding never drove anyone else to a recording session again. How does a driver walk out of a recording studio with a record deal? What did Otis sing that made everyone stop and listen? If you enjoy stories like this, subscribe to Soul Legends Untold. Let us know in the comments which legend's story you'd like to hear next.
Macon, Georgia, 1941. The city sat in the middle of the American South like a held breath. Cotton fields stretched to the horizon. Church bells rang on Sunday mornings, and in the public housing project called Tyndall Heights, a boy named Otis Redding grew up watching his father work himself to the bone, first as a sharecropper, then at Robins Air Force Base, while Otis himself learned that the only place he ever felt completely free was inside a song. By the time he was 10, he was singing gospel in the Vineville Baptist Church choir. By 11, he was entering talent contests and winning, not once, not twice, 15 weeks in a row at disc jockey Hamp Swain's Teenage Talent Show, pocketing the $5 prize each time like it was proof that something bigger was waiting. But proof and opportunity are two different things, and in the Jim Crow South of the late 1950s, a black boy with a voice could sing all he wanted. The doors to the bigger world did not open easily. Otis needed a break. What he got instead, for a while, was a steering wheel.
Johnny Jenkins was everything Otis Redding was not, at least on paper. Jenkins was a guitarist, flashy, left-handed, wild on stage. His band, the Pine Toppers, had already made a regional name for themselves with an instrumental called Love Twist. People knew Jenkins in Macon. Club owners knew him. Record men had started to sniff around. Otis, meanwhile, had dropped out of school at 15 to help support his family. He was singing wherever he could. Small stages, local gigs, anywhere that would have him. When he connected with Jenkins and the Pine Toppers, he found a home. He became their vocalist. He became their driver. The driving part was practical. Jenkins did not have a license. Otis did. So when the band needed to get somewhere, Otis put his hands on the wheel. In the summer of 1962, an Atlanta-based record promoter named Joe Galkin came calling. Galkin worked with Atlantic Records, and he had heard something in Jenkins. He thought the guitarist might click with Booker T and the MGs, the house band at Stax Records in Memphis, Tennessee. Stax was a small label, barely a few years old, operating out of a converted movie theater on Macklemore Avenue, but it had something, a sound, a feel, a warmth in the grooves that you could not fake. Galkin set up a session. Jenkins was excited, the band stayed home, and Otis Redding drove. The drive from Macon to Memphis is about 6 hours on a good day, 6 hours through Georgia red clay and Mississippi flatlands, past gas stations with signs that told you which bathroom was yours and which was not. 6 hours to think, 6 hours to wonder. Otis was 20 years old. He had a wife at home, Zelma, whom he had married the year before. He had a baby on the way. He had ambition the size of the state they were crossing, and a voice that most people who heard it agreed was something unusual. But he was the driver. They arrived at the Stax studio on Macklemore Avenue. Steve Cropper, the label's staff guitarist and a member of Booker T and the MGs, was there when the big car pulled up. He watched a large young man climb out from behind the wheel and start unloading equipment from the back. That was Otis. Nobody introduced him as a singer. Nobody needed to. He was the driver. The session began. Jenkins sat down with Booker T and the MGs, Cropper on guitar, Al Jackson on drums, Louis Steinberg on bass, Booker T. Jones on organ. The tape rolled. And nothing happened.
Or rather, the wrong things happened. The session could not find a groove. Jenkins and the house band circled each other without clicking. Takes came and went. The energy in the room stayed flat. Jim Stewart, who co-owned Stax with his sister Estelle Axton, watched from the control room with the expression of a man who had seen sessions like this before, the kind that do not go anywhere. After a while, the musicians began to pack up. The clock had run down. Whatever had been hoped for had not arrived. That is when Joe Galkin spoke up. Galkin knew Otis had been singing with the Pine Toppers. He pushed. He told Stewart, "Give that kid a chance. There's some time left on the clock. Let him sing something." Stewart agreed, reluctantly. A few minutes, whatever was left. Otis walked to the microphone. He had prepared a song called Hey Hey Baby, up-tempo, energetic, a little like Little Richard. He launched into it. Stewart listened from behind the glass and felt nothing, or worse than nothing. The song sounded derivative. It sounded like an imitation. Stewart had heard Little Richard. He did not need a copy. Otis could feel the room cooling. He had one song left, one more chance before the musicians finished packing and the night was over. He turned to Steve Cropper and asked him to play church chords, simple, open, the kind of chords that did not get in the way of a voice, they just held it up. Cropper sat down at the piano. He played what Otis asked for, and Otis Redding began to sing These Arms of Mine. The song was his own. He had written it himself. It was not a shout. It was not a stomp. It was a slow, aching plea, the kind of longing that does not need to raise its voice because it is already speaking from somewhere too deep for volume. The room went still. Al Jackson stopped what he was doing. Louis Steinberg set down his bass. Booker T. Jones, who would later describe that moment to Uncut magazine, felt something shift in the air of the room. He said he had never been that close to a male singer, performing with so much feeling and passion, right on key, singing an original song, not performing it, but actually meaning it. "I don't think he was singing to impress," Jones recalled. "He was singing because that's the way he felt. He looked anything but the part. He was a driver, a gopher. He didn't have on nice clothes, but we recognized that we had a major artist in our presence." Jim Stewart came out of the control room. Stewart would later describe what he heard that afternoon plainly. Everybody was fixin' to go home, but Joe Galkin insisted we give Otis a listen. There was something different about that ballad. He really poured his soul into it. There was a conversation, there was a decision, and before that evening was over, Stax Records had offered Otis Redding a recording contract.
These Arms of Mine was released on Volt Records, Stax's subsidiary label, in October 1962. It did not explode overnight. Radio took time to catch on, but it charted the following March, climbing to number 20 on the Billboard R&B chart. It eventually sold more than 800,000 copies. More importantly, it was the beginning. Over the next 5 years, Otis Redding recorded at Stax like a man who knew he did not have time to waste. He worked fast and he worked hard. Pain in My Heart, I've Been Loving You Too Long, Respect, the song he wrote and recorded, and then watched Aretha Franklin turn into something even larger than he had imagined. Try a Little Tenderness, Fa 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 Fa, a catalog built song by song, session by session, in the same converted movie theater where he had once stood at the microphone as an afterthought. He did not miss shows. In a career of hundreds of performances, he canceled only 2. He drove his band hard because he drove himself harder. Steve Cropper, who became his closest collaborator, described Otis as a man who was always 100% full of energy. "I looked up to him as an older brother," Cropper would say years later. "After he died, I was surprised to find out I was the same age as he was." By 1967, Otis Redding was not just a star in the black music world. He was becoming something larger.
A Stax Volt European tour made him the biggest American soul act on the continent. Melody Magazine, the most respected music publication in Britain, named him the top male vocalist of 1967, ending a 10-year streak held by Elvis Presley. That June, he played the Monterey International Pop Festival in California. He walked onto that stage in a green suit and stood before 60,000 people, most of them white, most of them hearing him live for the first time. He called them the Love Crowd. He sang 5 songs in a rain-shortened set and left the field in a different state than he found it. Bob Weir of the Grateful Dead watched from the side of the stage and later said he was pretty sure he had seen God perform. Otis Redding was 25 years old. He was exactly where he had been trying to get since those $5 talent show prizes in Macon, and he was just beginning. That summer, while touring in California, Otis accepted an offer from concert promoter Bill Graham. Graham gave him use of a houseboat moored in Sausalito, just across the bay from San Francisco. Otis spent his days on the water with a guitar in his hands, watching the ferries drift past, watching the fog roll in from the Pacific, feeling, for possibly the first time in years, completely still. He started writing. He had 2 lines at first. "Sitting in the morning sun, I'll be sitting when the evening comes." He played them over and over for days. His road manager, Speedo Sims, sat nearby and listened. He told interviewers later that he could not understand where Otis was going with the song for a long time. It was different from everything Otis had recorded before, slower, quieter, more resigned, like a man watching the world move and choosing, for once, not to chase it. The song came together slowly. Otis carried it with him through the fall, through more touring, through the days shortening toward winter. In late November, he flew to Memphis. He walked into Stax and called Steve Cropper. He told him he had a hit. They finished it in half an hour. Sittin' on the dock of the bay came together with Cropper fleshing out the bridge, filling in the verses, making the story about Otis himself, about leaving Georgia and heading for the Frisco Bay, about sitting and watching, about the loneliness that does not go away even when everything else is going right. At the end of the recording, when Otis reached the fade-out and could not find the ad-lib he usually delivered in that moment, he did something he had never done on a record before. He whistled. Simple, unplanned, just a man filling a moment with the sound that was in him. Everyone in the studio that day knew what they had. Cropper knew it. Duck Dunn, the bassist, knew it. Otis knew it better than anyone. They listened to the playback and let it sit in the air. "We finally had the song that would cross him over," Cropper would say later. "We listened to it over and over. We all kind of knew it was a hit."
They had plans. Otis wanted the steeple singers to come in and add background vocals. Cropper thought about adding waves and birds, the sounds Otis had described from the houseboat in Sausalito. There were things still to do, but the song was there. The core of it was captured. The final session for additional overdubs took place on December 7, 1967. 3 days later, on December 10th, Otis Redding boarded his twin-engine Beechcraft plane in Ohio for the short flight to Madison, Wisconsin. He had a show that night. He never missed shows. The plane went down into Lake Monona at 3:28 in the afternoon, 3 minutes from the runway. Otis Redding was 26 years old. Sitting on the dock of the bay was released on January 8, 1968. By March, it had reached #1 on the Billboard Hot 100, the first posthumous single ever to top the chart in the United States. It sold more than 4 million copies. It won 2 Grammy Awards. In 1999, BMI named it the 6th most performed song of the entire 20th century. Steve Cropper added the sounds of waves and seagulls to the final mix, the way Otis had described them from the houseboat, the sounds that had been in the song from the beginning, before a single word was written. When people talk about what Otis Redding might have become, they talk about what was already scheduled. Ed Sullivan, the Smothers Brothers, Carnegie Hall, the mainstream crossing that Monterey had made inevitable. He was booked, he was ready, the world was prepared to receive him in a way it had not been before. He did not get there, but what he left behind is enough. A boy from Tyndall Heights Public Housing who dropped out of school at 15 and drove a guitarist to Memphis because the man did not have a license, who stood at a microphone that was not supposed to be his and sang a song he had written himself in a room full of people who were ready to go home. They did not go home. They stayed, they listened, and the world has been listening ever since. And sometimes the moments that change everything begin when no one is expecting them. What part of this story stayed with you the most? Let us know in the comments. We'll see you in the next story.